All right, so we have talked about functions, anonymous functions, self-invoking functions, and now let's look at some of the properties inside of the this keyword. The word this, you can't see it, but I'm doing air quotes. The this keyword is a special reserved word used for object-oriented programming. So let's take a look at how this relates to a function. We have a function. We're just going to call it anything. And in here, we use this dot variable name, whatever that variable name might be. But at this moment, that doesn't exist. Now, this keyword is used for grabbing any other information associated with anything, with the function called anything. So if we do a console.log on the keyword this, and let's just run this function. Okay, I go to my page and I just refreshed. It gives me a lot. It gives me everything I can do with this. This is a very powerful word. Now, we've seen lists before, but we have never seen quite an extensive list of what we can and cannot do. So this is a very powerful thing. But in there is also the ability to add your own variables. Now, these variables that are connected to the this keyword are called properties. So any sort of variable inside of a class, which is more advanced JavaScript, those are called properties. And functions inside of a class are called methods. Don't need to remember that for now. Maybe just put that in your back pocket for a bit. So what happens when we say this dot number? We're just going to console that. It's undefined. Okay, well, now that we know that it's undefined, we can say if this dot number, and I'm just making up number, that could be really anything else you want to name it, is equal to strict comparison undefined, then let's set this to something. It's going to be 0. So this first console log should be undefined, but now we've defined it as 0. Now if we console log this again, here's what we're going to get. 0, undefined and 0, just as expected, because computers, for the most part, run from top to bottom. Well, this didn't exist yet, but now it does. Now, this is no different than assigning a normal variable inside of a function. So why even use the this keyword? Well, first of all, it's a great introduction into object-oriented programming. That dot notation, this dot that we see in all sorts of places when we're talking about strings and we get the length, this is what we're doing. So now, what happens if we wanted to invoke this function more than once? We could say every time this function is invoked, we do this dot number plus plus, just increment the number by 1. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this. And console log this dot number. So this is going to presumably show the number 1, because if it's not defined, define it as 0, and either way, increment by 1. So the lowest number this could be is 1. Refresh our page. There we go. Number is 1. But what happens if I copy this function like 10-ish times? It's actually more than 10-ish times. Look at that. We now see that this dot number has incremented how many times? From 1 to 12. So now we're storing information inside of a function that's not being overwritten every time we use it. Every other function that we've used, every other anonymous function or self-invoking function that we've written, all the variables overwrite each other every single time. It's like a fresh slate every time you call it. But sometimes you don't want that. Sometimes you want to preserve some of that information. So now essentially you can save information inside of your function that is never overwritten unless you want to explicitly overwrite it. Now this keyword comes into play when you start getting into object-oriented programming, which means you have classes, not just functions. A class is essentially a group of functions that work together for a common purpose. And when you start getting into that, this keyword becomes very important, because this refers to the entire object. So function, anything, this, actually, let's not dot dot that. This refers to your function, this. That's what it's talking about. So there's no assignment for this lesson. I just wanted to let you know that this keyword exists. You don't have to do anything with it. Just know that in the future, you're going to run into that, especially when you start learning things like jQuery uses this keyword a lot. And this keyword is referring to the function in which it lives in. Now, if you wrap a function inside of a function, so if you had another function, this keyword refers to this one. And if you ever wanted to use this keyword referring to the anything function, you would say variable, and you could call this anything, but a common practice is like underscore t or underscore this is equal to this. And now inside of this function, what you can do is this dot name is equal to whatever. So again, you don't have to do anything with that. Just tuck that away in your back pocket for now, because eventually we're going to run into that as JavaScript developers. And it's a very common thing. So when you see that, don't freak out. All it's referring to is its parent function.